On today's episode, where does Trevor Connelly rank among the top forwards in this year's draft? I'll answer that, and we'll talk about the new Blackhawks TV network.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, a quick reminder to hit that like button for me. Comment down below as to your thoughts on Trevor Connelly, whether you'd like to see him added to the Blackhawks prospect pool, and also give me your reaction to the Blackhawks getting a new TV network for this upcoming season. And make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well, because starting later on this week, I'm going to be getting into my Chicago Blackhawks Summer 2024 Top 10 Prospects list. Plus, I still have a handful of prospects to cover before the NHL Draft gets underway later this month. So hit that subscribe button for me. It helps me out greatly. It won't cost you anything. And also, you'll be up to date on all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Last but certainly not least, got to let you know today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Keeping the ball rolling here with these 2024 NHL draft profiles. I'm going to be getting into another high-end forward in this year's draft here today in Trevor Connelly, 6'1", 165-pound winger who turned 18 back in February. And a quick reminder, though, I've already covered most of the prospects expected to go in the top 10 of this year's draft, like Ivan Demidov, Artem Levshinov, Caden Lindstrom, Zeev Buium, Zane Parekh, so on and so forth. If there's someone in particular that you want to hear more about that I've already covered, you can easily find those episodes on my YouTube channel under the 2024 NHL Draft playlist. And also, if there's someone in particular you want me to cover for sure before the draft begins later on this month, go and comment that player's name down below as well. But getting into Trevor Connelly, there's a lot to like about this kid's game. He's coming off of a very impressive year with the Tri-City Storm of the USHL, and where he tallied 78 points in 52 games, 31 goals and 47 assists, and he actually led all players in points per game in the USHL at a 1.50 margin. Actually did it by a pretty handed margin as well. And we saw the development in his game from his first year in the USHL with Tri-City, where he had 47 points in 57 games, 24 goals, and 23 assists. So we got to see the good goal scoring abilities in year one of him in the USHL, but he really developed and progressed in the playmaking areas this past season to help him be the leading scorer in a points per game average this past year in that league. We also saw him have a very good showing for the United States at the U18 World Juniors, tallying 9 points, 4 goals, and 5 assists in 7 games there. And he's going to be playing in college hockey next year at one of the best programs in the country, the University of Providence, where I believe fellow Blackhawks defenseman prospect, or I guess I shouldn't say fellow Blackhawks prospects, not like Trevor Connelly's in the organization or anything. The Blackhawks defenseman Tage Harding, I believe, will be returning for his senior campaign with the Friars next year. Connor Kelly, I think, has used all his eligibility, and the Blackhawks haven't signed him at this point in time. I think he's already used all his eligibility. Maybe he has 1 year left, not 100% positive on that. But regardless, Connelly definitely ranks out as one of the top forwards in this year's draft. As far as the rankings go, he was rated 14th by Elite Prospects, 11th by Bob McKenzie, 27th by Craig Button. That's the lowest ranking by far among this group. 21st by Tony Ferrari, 14th by McKean's Hockey, 13th by Chris Peters, 15th by Daily Faceoff, 17th by Sportsnet, and 15th by Dobber Prospect. So most draft scouts and analysts have him going somewhere between numbers 11 and 17 or 18. Craig Button and Tony Ferrari both have him dropping out of the top 20. But breaking down his strengths and his weaknesses, first and foremost, his skating is unbelievable. One of the top skaters in this year's draft for sure. He's got incredible top speed. He can go coast to coast and blow it by you in transition. He's got the highlight reel ability because of that top level speed, and he's got really good edge work as well. Really good technique. He picks up speed in a hurry. He gets to that top speed really fast. So yeah, all around one of the best skaters in this year's draft, and he pairs that with unbelievably silky hands. He's capable of scoring that razzle dazzle goal, and because of the skill and the speed combination, I feel like he has a game that's really going to translate well to the NHL level. I think he can be a puck carrier at the next level. We see it in the way he reads defenders out there. He ducks and weaves through them really well. And again, he just gets to that top speed so fast where if you're a defenseman and there's not enough ice in between you in the neutral zone, Trevor Connelly is going to absolutely blow right by you. He'll pick that up in a heartbeat. And he has some good skills in his own right with the puck outside of just his puck handling and his puck carrying. He's got some really good vision, sees and reads the game really well. He knows how to find his teammates in open slots, and he also has a really good wrist shot. The curl and drag release is one of the best in this year's draft class, absolutely, and you saw that on display in a lot of his highlights from his 31 goals that he scored in 52 games this year. And he also has some pretty notable power for a kid that's, beginning of this year was listed at about $150. Now is somewhere between $165 and $170, depending on where you're checking. But I'm really impressed with how he's able to blow it by so many goaltenders despite being so light out there on the ice. And I think if this kid can gain 15 to 20 pounds over these next couple of years, he has a game, like I said, that I think is ready for the next level. Maybe he's not the most dynamic or gifted playmaker or goal scorer, but he's got a very good all-in-all offensive makeup and thinks the game very well with an offensive mind. He's got above average hockey IQ. As far as the weaknesses go, he definitely needs to get stronger, whether he's $165, $170, whatever it may be. That's not going to cut it at the next level. And I think also he's still a very raw prospect because he is so small, and you'll get those little blips, but he still is going to need a couple of years to put it all together and to add some weight on there. So he's probably a little bit more of a project than maybe someone like Consta Helenius, who could be NHL ready by maybe not this next season, but the year after. And he also doesn't really provide much of a defensive game. There's not much to love there at all. You see a lot of flybys, a lot of poke checks, not really all that engaged in board battles, which, to be fair, at his size, it's never going to be the strength of his game, but there's just a lot of concerns about what he can do when he doesn't have the puck, and if he's even capable of being someone who can be good on the back check and go and turn defense into offense. I don't really ever seeing that being part of his game, and there's just no real physical upside whatsoever to see there. No penalty kill upside either, and as someone who's not a center either, obviously centers are more valuable than wingers are. You love his offensive game, but you'd like to see him find ways to chip in more, and he just hasn't really done that so far in his young career. So he's a bit lackluster, and there's lots to be desired in his defensive game. And then there also are some off the ice issues, a lot of them, to be quite frank. And I'm not going to talk about them here. It's not hard to find. You can go and Google search it if you want. But there are some concerns about kind of his character and his leadership abilities. But to be fair, he did wear an A for Tri-City this past year. He has been making strides in terms of volunteering in the community and trying to shed a better light upon himself. So at least he's making strides in those areas. As far as the projection goes, though, as I mentioned, I think this kid has a really solid offensive game that translates well to the next level. And because of that, because of his speed and his skill. And listen, I know he's only $170, but there's runway there. He's 6'1". Like if he gets to $190, $195, and just a little bit more filled out and a little bit more rugged, yeah, I think that will give NHL clubs even more confidence about his abilities moving forward. But because of his game, I ultimately expect him to get picked somewhere between numbers 10 and number 16, probably number 12 to 16 if I'm being honest, but there's a lot to like here. I honestly like his game more than Consta Helenius at this point in the draft because we're still talking about upside this early, and I think it's prevalent there with Trevor Connelly. You might have to be patient with him, but there's a lot of runway because of that speed and skill. That will always play in the NHL, especially with how things have been going these last few years. As far as a potential long-term fit between the Blackhawks and Trevor Connelly, like I said, I love his speed and I love his skill. I know Kyle Davidson would absolutely love that as well. The one thing I will say is that adding someone like Trevor Connelly, it's just another undersized guy into the Blackhawks top six. And when you have Connor Bedard, Nick Lardis potentially in that mix, Oliver Moore and Frank Nazar as well, even, Ryan Green and Gavin Hayes, maybe they're top six guys, middle six guys, but even they don't have the best size in the world, and they don't really play that rugged style necessarily. So I do worry that adding another player like that in the Blackhawks prospect pool is a little bit counterintuitive, and at a numbers perspective, like how many of those guys do you really need at the same point in time? And probably even more prevalent than that is just Connolly's off the ice issues. If you've read about him, quite honestly, it's not a very good look for this kid. And as I mentioned, he has been making strides. He deserves credit for doing that. But as far as the Blackhawks are concerned, like given their history, given there was another lawsuit brought up a month ago, like I just think it would be a really, really tough look if the Blackhawks took this kid. And listen, I like him as a player. I think he could be a really sound NHL player. I just think the Blackhawks at this time, it would put them back under the microscope for all the wrong reasons. And they just absolutely cannot afford that. And when reading that article about Connolly that came out from The Athletic, there have been a couple of GMs that have said they've just kind of written him off because of his past character issues and whatnot. And, I don't know what's true and what's not. I'm not here to tell you what to believe and what not to believe. All I know is this definitely would cast a bright light again on the Chicago Blackhawks. And I just don't think they can afford that. So I think they have to pass on Trevor Connelly as much as I like his game. Ultimately, though, because of his skill, I don't think he'll even be available for them at number 18. But I just think it would be a tough look for them if they were to draft a kid like that, given their history and his. I think it makes things a little bit too difficult personally. But there is Trevor Connelly's 2024 NHL Draft Profile. Go and hit the comment section right now whether you agree to the sentiment I just shared, you disagree, your thoughts on Trevor Connelly's game, where you think he ends up getting drafted. Make sure to go and let me know about all of that down in the comment section. Coming up in just a minute here, Blackhawks fans, don't go anywhere because I'm about to share my thoughts on the announcement that came yesterday of the Blackhawks landing a new TV network for this upcoming season. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. It's playoff time, baby, in the NBA and the NHL. We've reached the NBA championship between the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. We have the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers taking each other on for the Stanley Cup this year. And of course, baseball is back in full swing as well. And FanDuel is your perfect place to bet on every single game. And if you're a new customer, do not miss out on this deal. FanDuel is offering $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed for new customers. Your first bet is a guaranteed win over at FanDuel when you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. And you can use that $150 worth of bonuses to bet on everything from slam dunks en route to the NBA championship, slap shots en route to the Stanley Cup, and also home runs across all the great ballparks. And me personally, I'm going to be riding with the favorites, the Florida Panthers, -125 right now on FanDuel to take home the Stanley Cup and avenge their loss from last year against Vegas. They're going to take it to the Edmonton Oilers in this series. Go and make your first bet an automatic win if you're a new customer right now by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed if you're a new customer. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Segment 2, a big-time announcement came yesterday that the Chicago Sports Network, also known as CHSN, will launch this October and serve as the new home of the Chicago White Sox, the Chicago Bulls, and of course, our Chicago Blackhawks. CHSN will officially be replacing NBC Sports Chicago, which has been the home of the Blackhawks broadcast, the Bulls and White Sox broadcast as well, since all the way back in 2004. I think a lot of us have become very accustomed to watching NBC Sports Chicago since they landed that deal with Comcast all those years ago. And I'm not sure if you all remember this actually, but there was kind of wind that this could be going down. It was out there on the rumor mill. I talked about it on the show a handful of months ago because we did know that the current deal with NBC Sports Chicago was set to expire on October 1st. So, with that being known, there were kind of some rumblings that something like this could be happening, but officially got announced yesterday. And I think the first and biggest, most important question that all of us Blackhawks, Bulls, and White Sox fans are asking right now is, well, is Comcast going to carry it? Is Comcast going to pick it up? And in a statement from Chicago Sports Network yesterday, they said they will launch with agreements with cable streaming and over-the-air providers. However, conveniently, they did not list which one. And with, classic cable kind of becoming a thing of the past, these new deals have been a little bit more complex and convoluted over the last couple of years. And even recently, I saw this was mentioned in Ben Pope's article from the Chicago Sun-Times that dropped yesterday. According to Cubs president of operations, they're worried that Comcast could possibly even drop Marquee Network when their deal is set to expire this September. And Comcast spokesperson declined to comment on that matter. And, I wouldn't be surprised if something like this happened. And as someone who I don't have basic cable any longer, I haven't had it for quite a while. I've had YouTube TV. That's how I've watched all the Blackhawks games. It's how I watch all sports games. Obviously, though, I'm not able to watch the Chicago Cubs because Marquee Network is not on YouTube TV. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world, but I know us Blackhawks fans would not be very happy if we heard that something like this was going down. Still, at this point, we don't have any further details, and it is expected that Chicago Sports Network will be making some crucial announcements with critical details later on here in the summer. They didn't give any specific dates or anything, but these are all noteworthy tidbits that us fans need to be aware of. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that, Comcast and YouTube TV and some of the most popular streaming and non-cable options for everyone out there will be possible so that we're all able to enjoy the Chicago Blackhawks. But crazier things have certainly happened. So we'll see what the latest development is there. As soon as we get any further updates on that matter, I'll make sure to talk about it right here on Locked On Blackhawks. But also got to wonder what this means for folks like Pat Boyle, who's been around as the pregame, intermission, and postgame host for, at least I think 15 years at this point in time, right? Charlie Roumeliotis, Blackhawks insider for NBC Sports Chicago, reoccurring guest here on the show, one of my favorite people around the Chicago Blackhawks. He's so knowledgeable. I severely enjoy talking with him every time he comes on with the show. We have a great flow. He's also someone who, if I go down to a Blackhawks practice or training camp or something, he goes out of his way to say what's up to me. He's just a good dude. So hoping that Charlie will be able to stick around. He's absolutely deserving of it. But yeah, I got to wonder what those NBC Sports employees, what their future is going to be looking like. Pat Boyle, Charlie Roumeliotis, Kaylee Chelios, John Scott, someone that we've seen in between there as well. This doesn't, though, include Chris Voster's, Darren Pang, Troy Murray, or John Weidman. They all technically, I believe, are employees of the Chicago Blackhawks. So they're here to stay for this upcoming season, but there's going to be some more important developments for sure coming out on this matter later on here in the summer. I'll be covering all of that right here on Locked On Blackhawks, but there are my thoughts on the news of the new Chicago Sports Network that's going to be the home of the Blackhawks TV broadcast for this upcoming season. Again, give me your reaction on that announcement down below right now in the comment section. Coming up in just a moment here, before I wrap things up, I do still have to get into Reese Johnson's 2023-2024 NHL Draft Profile. back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just a reminder to hit that like button for me, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. Thank you very much. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today provides you the biggest sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus all of our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, segment 3, down to the final report card that I'm going to be doing here in the offseason. And again, just one final heads up, if there is a certain player that you may have missed, or you want to hear what grade I gave them for their performance this season, you can easily find all of those episodes on my YouTube channel under the 2024 report card playlist. And everything is also time coded in the description, so you can easily jump around to that point of today's episode. Last but certainly not least, though, the final player that I'm going to be getting into is 25-year-old forward Reese Johnson, who's going to be turning 26 next month in July, and has spent the last 3 seasons being a fringe NHLer for the Chicago Blackhawks, used, of course, mostly in a fourth-line role or an extra guy when he is healthy. And, he's never put up really anything notable offensively, and he never will. That's just not his game. And similar to Mackenzie Entwistle, who I broke down a couple of days ago, it's kind of hard to exactly gauge a player like Entwistle or a player like Johnson's value when they're getting such limited ice time. It's in a fourth-line role, and they're on one of the worst teams in all of hockey. And it makes it very interesting when both of those guys are set to be pending restricted free agents here this summer. It's going to be really curious to see what the Blackhawks wind up doing with those two guys. But there's a reason I finished with those two here, and I'll be talking about their contract situations in just a second. But getting into the numbers for Reese Johnson, 42 games played out of him this year, which is actually down from 57 last year. And most of those absences were actually due to injury. So missed some time with injury again this year, but was definitely used more as a healthy scratch this year than he ever has before. In those 42 games, 2 goals and 3 assists for 5 points. Yeah, I know, nothing too notable here. He had 2 goals in the year prior, so right on track with that. 3 assists is actually up from the 2 that he had the year prior, but down from the 5 that he had in 37 games during his first NHL season with the Blackhawks, and the 5 points is actually 1 short of what he had in his last 2 years here in Chicago. Racked up 40 penalty minutes, which, despite him only playing in 42 games, is actually the most that he's ever tallied in the NHL, but most of that is due to him being very willing to drop the gloves and provide that physicality and that spark for this team. And very few guys, particularly in the forward group, would offer that for this team. Both of his goals came from the even strength variety, shot 3.9%, which is a career low even for his standards, and did have 51 shots this year, which isn't terrible for a fourth liner with his offensive game. Averaged 10 minutes and 56 seconds of time on ice, down 5 seconds from the year before. So basically the same exact role. The most interesting statistic here for Reese Johnson's season, though, was he won 51.9% of his faceoffs, and he's been above 50% every year he's played in the NHL. However, he took a career low 81 draws this year. And when I broke down Mackenzie Entwistle, he took a career high faceoffs this year, but put up career low numbers. Reese Johnson is clearly the better faceoff man between those two. And I would guess that Luke Richardson likes Entwistle's speed a little bit more down the center ice compared to Reese Johnson's. But even then, why are we not having Reese take the draws like we had Nick Foligno do for Connor Bedard this year? This guy's a good faceoff man. Blocked 16 shots, nothing too crazy. Added 109 hits, which sounds like a lot for 42 games, but if you actually look at his hit per game margin, believe it or not, it's down from the last couple of years. He had 141 in 37 games during his rookie year. Only 7 takeaways compared to 9 giveaways. Didn't really do all that much in that department. And then in the analytics, 43.5 Corsi for percentage, which is actually the best that he's tallied in his last 3 years, and decent numbers for a fourth liner on the squad. But the goals for to goals against differential, not that surprising given his expertise and the Blackhawks how good they were as a team. Not very at all. 10 goals for to 38 goals against at even strength, but a respectable 90.5 on ice save percentage. Breaking down the good and the bad here for Reese Johnson. It's kind of hard to find things to say here, quite honestly, but he's a physical player. He likes to throw his weight around when he gets an opportunity. He's not scared to do it whatsoever. I think he has good hustle and good compete, and he knows his role and does it to a T. Most of his goals come from the gritty variety when he's crashing the net, which I like to see. But I think his biggest asset is just his ability to win faceoffs. And, in the defensive zone, he can do that well. And he can be a decent penalty killer. He didn't get a ton of time this year compared to previous years, but I do still think he could provide a little bit of value in that area. As far as the bad goes, he just doesn't offer anything with the puck. I mean, you could say Mackenzie Entwistle doesn't offer anything with the puck, and then that's another level when we're talking about Reese Johnson here. That obviously caps his ceiling. He doesn't have a ton of foot speed either. He's just a real meat and potatoes fourth liner that's, probably a fringe NHLer on the Blackhawks or on any other team. He had a low shooting percentage this year, chipped in even fewer than he has in the year past, which, isn't going to determine what grade I give him or anything. Ultimately, I'm going to give him a C for his performance this year. 62% of the voters actually agreed with me. That was the most popular option. 23% the next popular D/F, and then 14% gave him a B. I think that's right on par. But the real reason why I wanted to end with Mackenzie Entwistle and Reese Johnson here is my final two report cards is both of them are going to be pending RFAs, or they are pending RFAs for the Blackhawks this year. Kyle Davidson is going to have to figure out what to do with these guys. And then there's also Taylor Radish, who is an RFA. Colin Blackwell, Joey Anderson is an RFA as well. To me, Joey Anderson absolutely has to be coming back. I think it would be a disgrace if they don't bring him back. And if we're talking Taylor Radish or Colin Blackwell, there is a possibility neither of those guys are coming back. I would go Taylor Radish over Colin Blackwell, though. Maybe there's a future here for Taylor Radish. I know it was a terrible year. I get that understandably, but I would rather give him a chance than Colin Blackwell because I don't see him being a puzzle piece moving forward like 3 or 4 years down the road. He also is prone to injury. So I'd be willing to take a chance on Radish, and also there is a chance that both Mackenzie Entwistle and Reese Johnson aren't coming back. I could make that case for that. But if we're talking about a conversation where it's Entwistle versus Reese Johnson, personally, I'm going with Reese Johnson. I just like his ability to win faceoffs. I think he's the more physical of the two players. I don't know. I think if we're pulling hairs here between these two guys, I think Johnson could provide more possible value to this Blackhawks team as an extra than Mackenzie Entwistle could. Go and comment down below your thoughts on that matter right now. And one thing I will say, whenever I bring something like this up, when I'm pulling hairs between fourth liners, and it brings me back to the Boris Kachuk conversation earlier on in the year, there were people on X who would be like, oh, who cares about Boris Kachuk, man? Listen, this is my job to talk about these things. These are the conversations that I want to get into. I think it would be lazy for me to not have those conversations, especially when we have all the time in the world to do so here in the offseason. So look, am I talking about two guys that probably hold no value to an NHL franchise when they're competing for the Stanley Cup playoffs? Yes, and I absolutely understand that. But that's not where the Chicago Blackhawks are, and we still have to make these kinds of decisions. Kyle Davidson is having these conversations. Why can't I here? I think it would be lazy for me not to. So go and give me your thoughts on that matter in the comment section. I'm going Reese Johnson over Mackenzie Entwistle. If they are bringing one of those two guys back, to me, it's Reeser, but that's just my opinion. Let me know if you feel the same way in the comment section down below. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way, you can catch the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at JackBushman2, or you can check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.